Welcome to Jerry's Zen Den. It has fucking, excuse the language, it's gone to work and it's butted heads. I'm just talking about in general that talks about these awakening experiences. Got our bubbling creek, river, gentlemen fishing, fly fishing just behind me a little while ago. Below the surface domination of this individual's experience. Work that has jostled that ego. And so this is one of the things I wanted to share with you today. We're back at our favorite spot here as we're finding out. We got 5 to 6 inches of snow here by the Indianapolis, Indiana area about 36 hours ago. Totally different look. About 23 degrees Fahrenheit. So, winter in the Midwest. Got our bubbling creek, river, gentlemen fishing, fly fishing just behind me a little while ago. We'll show some of that video, I'm sure. Good to be with you. I hope you're having a good day wherever you're at in your day, in your world. Thanks for joining. So, Zen, what are we going to chat on? I've been talking some about ego, sort of a deep subject. Can't claim to know everything about it by any stretch. The part for me that stands out about the ego is that the effect it has, whatever name we put on it, there's some kind of process. There's some kind of process that occurs for human beings with our mind. And it has a lot to do with self-protection, psychological self-protection, especially as far as the ego. I mean, yes, there's this huge drive for maintaining our own life and our health, right? The flight or fight response if something is physically threatening our health, our life. While that is true, when I talk about the ego here, that's much more about the psychology part of it. The way it is, this process that occurs in our minds, in humans' minds, it sees fit that it needs to protect something. There's a part of us, our experience, and/or in particular the way our mind is, where, yeah, it's like this big psychological filter, this umbrella over us. We'll see what other terms they come up with. And so it's this, this way it is that pervades our experience and us, where it's protecting against threats, psychological threats. So what's this refer to? Things that we have become associated to, that we believe in, that are important to us, that define in some way who we are, how we've come to think about things and experiences we've had. These things get somewhat solidified. These things become parts of the way our mind is experiencing, and we want that to be continued. We don't want those associations, these things we sort of believe in, these things that have been important to us. We don't want those things eliminated because part of our identity is in there. It's like, yeah, part of our sense of who we are. But a lot of this is less than conscious. So I've been talking about this area about the ego. I guess I'll just point out, the bubbling water over the rocks behind. I hope that's a nice, peaceful experience in this setting here that's so beautiful. Moving forward, talking about the ego as to how it protects people. And I'll finish off just briefly, I believe, where I want to put something out there that speaks to how important this is, that this self-protection process that we have naturally in a human mind has us become less clear. We get stuck on things that are important to us, and when things threaten it, we lose our discernment to varying degrees. We don't want to hear it, and this this somewhat less than conscious movement that occurs within how we are experiencing and what we're seeing is we sort of shut down different things. We want to hold on to the things that support what, again, I use the word that, well, what we've associated to us, what we believe, what's become important. So this is like a structure inside of us, in our mind, but so inside of us as a human being. And we don't get pushed off that spot very easily. We see it all throughout the world. Politics, sports, relationships. I mean, it's occurring in really moment to moment throughout a person's life. I'm not going to go into this next area much at all. I just thought of it. I'll mention it so that likewise, the habits we have in our daily life, the things we think about, and the ways we experience them, the ways we have learned to cope and move and be ourselves. Yeah, we have a personality which falls under this umbrella, but there's also this apparatus, this process, the ego, that we have a comfort zone. So if we are pushed or start to explore in an area where we're attempting to cope with our moments in our lives in a different way, like becoming more open, becoming more sensitive, whatever it is, that could also elicit, this protection mechanism that sort of pulls back, as if it might say, hey, what are you doing? Let's not do that. So enough on that part of the ego that I talked about in a previous video. Apologize, it took a while. So be it. That's sort of how Jerry tends to operate. Me, whatever. So what else do I want to talk about? This process, this apparatus, what I'm talking about is ego, which has nothing to do with the ego that Freud talks about as far as I'm concerned. This is like the spiritual, what's more common in the Eastern world, I think I can generalize and say, where the ego is more on what I'm talking about, okay? So moving from the ego of self-protection and how that operates unconsciously and affects how we experience things and react to things, I'm going to talk about, let's throw a word out there called awakening or enlightenment. I threw that out quick as far as the point where the direction of what I'm going to be talking about. But, so anyways, it's shining this flashlight to this area. And I'm trying to link those kinds of experiences and living with some kind of contact in somewhere along that line with the ego, this process of self-protection. Most of what I'm talking about are just my experiences, things I've heard, but mostly my experiences and what seems to be true, what I've experienced. While this ego that protects us, I'm going to point out, pretty much like never goes away. The Buddha, the people who are most blatantly awakened, probably still have an ego functioning. Of course, it's not nearly as reactive. And they're coming from a place where its role and how powerful it shows up in a person's life is clearly minimized because they're holding space in these ways that they're more open, alert, and allowing and just, breathing in this openness and whatever wisdom is available within a person, especially when whatever it is, they've had these experiences that have led them to some awakening experiences. So whereas I continue to move forward to talk about is that it seems to me like however it happens that an individual, if they were to have these awakening experiences, however that happened, it seems to me like something has happened within the structure of the mind where the mind now is performing in a different way. The individual's experience of their moment-to-moment living has changed, and whether it's a physical or not aspect of a change in the brain, I suppose that ultimately there probably is some physical change. I'm not getting caught up on that at all today. But I'm simply saying that I think that the way in which awakening experiences perhaps would happen would often, if not typically, include where the person has really, it's sort of like toiling the soil of a garden, turning things over, getting the rich stuff, getting exposure. So the individual to have an awakening experience would perhaps most likely, because sometimes they happen absolutely any time, and like the individual hasn't necessarily done substantial spiritual work, but in general, usually it is. I'll make that statement, I believe that's accurate. So, I'm again making the point that oftentimes there's been spiritual work done, a deepening and opening. Surrender is a huge thing in the spiritual path. I won't go far with that today, but I think it's absolutely a very important thing. A little aside here, when people pray to their God, they have their relationship with God, they oftentimes are surrendering, they're turning themselves over. There's similarities to whether one surrenders into mindfulness and whatever spiritual work they're doing, letting go of certain things, falling open, being more porous, more open. That whole, and then, there you're breaking down the ego's normal structure of how it needs to work or how it does work. So again, I'm making this correlation between how the ego is active in the human mind and my estimation that oftentimes this area that I'm just talking about in general, that talks about these awakening experiences, includes work that has jostled that ego. It has fucking, excuse the language, it's gone to work and it's butted heads. And it always hasn't given the ego its normal, below the surface domination of this individual's experience. So I like that description in the last few sentences. And so this is one of the things I wanted to share with you today. Okay, personal experience now. I'll share a few things, okay? I did a video recently on the Zen Den, and I mentioned mindfulness, that I've been exploring mindfulness for about 15 years, 10, 15 years. Well, I took a look and did just a little bit of looking at the chronology of my, last 30 years or whatever. And so I've been involved with mindfulness about 25 years, maybe just a year or two more or so, for what that's worth. So I've explored that a ton. I'm not getting into the much specifics about that. A lot of it was personal work, walking, opening to experiences, just finding out how that felt. There was something that was juicy there. After 5 years, 8, 7 years or something, I fell into Eckhart Tolle, listening to his audio tapes. I've just purchased them. I didn't really know who he was from my recollection, and I love those, and I still highly appreciate Eckhart Tolle.
We come to the limitations of what people call their identity, their self. You can never be fulfilled for very long when you're trapped in your egoic sense of self, because ultimately it is a story in your mind that you tell yourself. It's a narrative. Me and my life. But it's not your life, because the only place where your life happens is in this moment. This moment, this is your life. But not all the memories and the accumulated conditionings in your mind. I call that sometimes your life situation. You have a life situation in time. Everybody has a past. So you have a past that you identify with, certain things from the past you identify with, good and bad. I forgot to mention that sometimes the ego does not find enough things to identify with. So let's say, for example, you don't have many possessions. Certainly you don't have more possessions than others, so you can't identify with that. Maybe your body doesn't look particularly great, so you know that your body isn't superior to most people's bodies. That was the case with me, and it still is, obviously. So, and then other things that people invest, knowledge. I know more than you, that's another big thing. And perhaps you don't have that either. You don't know that much, you don't have much, your body isn't great. What do I do now? The ego says, I need something to, it doesn't say that it's an unconscious process, but if it could speak, the ego said, what can I identify with?
The primary other area, other than the 24/7 opening to the path of exploring mindfulness, pretty passionate thing. I sort of dug it. It felt important. It was something that came somewhat natural for me. In addition to that, I ended up doing something called enlightenment intensives. These are somewhat primarily silent retreats, typically lasting 3 or 7 days. They're held around the world a fair amount. They're not extremely popular as far as what the masses are aware of by any stretch, which sometimes rather surprises me. But they were put together, invented, created by a guy named Charles Berner. I've had a fair amount of interactions with a gentleman who worked with him. A person's leaving the fishing field. He was the guy fishing down here before, fly fishing, which is beautiful. Charles Berner, I interacted with a guy who was a teacher, Lawrence Noyes is his name, who was Charles Berner's right-hand person, taking a lot of notes, working closely with him. That was very approximately 40 years ago. What about that? So anyways, this is the other primary area that I've explored. I sort of found it out of the blue. Without going further into that, I've probably done about 12 or 14 approximately. I haven't counted them. I haven't taken that step. Maybe just a few more than that. For what it's worth, at about a third of them, a total of 5, I believe, I've had direct experiences. These are called awakening experiences in their language of the enlightenment intensives. And they're plenty profound. There's a transient nature to them that a person doesn't typically stay at this level of this highness, this profoundness. And the levels of profoundness varies, each one, but they're very special. So the reason I'm bringing that up is I'm sort of lately standing up a little bit more to share and, do I say claim this territory? That sounds very ego and self-promoting, but it's more of different experiences I've had recently that have sort of nudged me, reminded me, given me a mirror of experiencing that how much the way I experience life has changed. Now, this is now where I want to talk about getting closer to finish up, I would say. So what's the deal? What am I talking about? What am I claiming? What's this about? Okay, I can go say a few different things maybe. There is an exercise I've heard about, not like it's being pushed in a major way to do, but it would be like, pretend you're like a cat who's hovering over a mouse hole, let's say in a wall, in a room, in a building. The mouse is, the cat is staring at it, and the cat holds so still, and it gives its total attention and awareness to that, just waiting to see if a mouse comes out. The exercise would be like the cat, as if you're looking at a hole, waiting for something. And while you're doing that, you're open perhaps to not having other thoughts. In other words, you're open to putting your awareness and concentration wholly on that and not to purposely go off in thought. So as a person were to do that, They're alert and open as they're doing it. And then when they do have different thoughts, they're aware of them. They attempt to not hold on to them, not make a big deal, but to continue to go back. The point is that when one does that, the nature of how they're experiencing moments for that individual is different. There's a greater quietness, a greater openness, and in particular, what happens is, it's almost like a different part of the brain is accessed, where the alertness and the wisdom that a person might have, the wisdom that's available in the mind, in the brain, has a greater opportunity to express itself. So I'll use the word direct. So in this situation, whatever one's experiencing, it's not so much thinking, conceptual, going through this up or down process of putting thoughts in terms and forging both what one's aware, what one's thinking, and what one's doing with the thinking. All that, it's top-down effort, which, by the way, Eckhart Tolle would probably in general call thought identification. I totally dig it. I'm right on that. That'll be another video. So what about awakening experiences? It's like, I happen to have a particularly valuable one about 1.5 years ago. It was a 14-day intensive, and this has, really been particularly helpful in as I continue living. I'm wary about talking about myself because, self-promotion's not cool, but it just seems like, in some ways it's valuable for me to come out and talk about things. I don't need to be doing that on a video, however, but I'm just providing information, to whoever the viewers are, and, this has value depending on what you're interested in, what your experience of is as you listen to me. So, getting closer to finishing up, talking about these experiences, it's like one's experiencing in a more direct way. There's clearly, and this idea of staring at a mouse hole with a focus and openness, and not promoting having other thoughts and being in that kind of a way, that brings some descriptive value to how I'm trying to describe what some of the changes are possible, which tend to occur on the spiritual path, on having some experiences that go in the direction of awakening experiences, however individuals are going to describe those. I may wrap it up at that. I appreciate you being with me today, your patience. Thank you. I wish you the very best. Until next time, you take care. We here at Zen Den, wishing you the best. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.